Good morning, partners and colleagues. I hope everyone has been keeping safe, healthy, and well despite the weather we're having recently. Welcome to today's Greening the Bank's virtual capacity building session on green financial taxonomies, hosted in collaboration with the Institute for Climate and Sustainable Cities, or ICSC. I am Ivan Christian Limhuko, Philippines Program Manager for Allotrope Partners, Greening the Bank's initiative. I'm honored to host today's much anticipated webinar to help increase the knowledge and awareness among our participants on a subject that is gaining increased attention at the global and regional levels and will likely impact green finance and sustainability efforts in the Philippines as well. We start today's program with a quick context setting presentation from the Greening the Banks team, to be followed by ICSC's discussion on the impact and role of green financial taxonomy in the clean energy transition. This will then be followed by a presentation on the EU Green Financial Taxonomy Framework, in which afterwards we will be hearing from a discussion on the Philippine Sustainable Finance Taxonomy Guidelines. A question and answer and panel discussion will soon follow before we wrap up everything and conclude the event by 11:30 a.m. Hopefully, after this session, we can continue conversations with some or most of you that plan to take follow-on action and next steps on green financial taxonomy. So starting off with a quick introduction to Allotrope Partners, our company is an internationally focused clean energy advisory firm specializing in emerging markets and technologies. Headquartered in Oakland, California, with staff in various countries, Allotrope works with public, private, and philanthropic entities to advance our shared clean energy and climate objectives. In the Philippines, Allotrope Partners has been leading our Greening the Banks work for 5 years already. Greening the Banks, or GTB as we call it, launched in the Philippines in 2019, seeks to build the capacity of Southeast Asian public and private sector financial institutions to actively participate in green finance. Through GTB, we are engaging with the different stakeholders to bridge the gap among banks, regulators, developers, and civil society organizations to unlock scaled green investments in the region by facilitating in-country dialogues, such as what we're doing today, while proactively collaborating with global, regional, and local initiatives with shared objectives. So before we continue with the rest of the context setting, we have prepared three poll questions that will help us assess our participants' familiarity and level of understanding with the topic at hand. Each poll question that is flashed on your screen will only take you a few seconds to answer, so we hope that everyone participates and answers the question. So yeah, Alni, thank you for pulling up the first question. So for the first poll, how familiar are you with the concept of green financial taxonomy? Please choose among the following choices that best describe your answer. So just so you know, we, the panelists and the speakers, also would be able to see or just to assess the familiarity of our audience in terms of the topic at hand. All right, so it will just take you a few seconds. So we can we can just proceed with the presentation as well. So I will be turning over the virtual floor to my colleague Alni Demaral, Allotrope Partners Philippines Clean Energy Analyst, to continue the presentation. Go ahead, Alni.
Thanks, Ivan, and good morning, everyone. So, continuing with our context setting, as Ivan mentioned, the main aim of Greening the Banks is to speed up green finance and help direct capital into sustainable activities. But knowing this actually brings some important question. What is exactly green? What does it mean to be sustainable? So, let me just share a quick story to put this into context. Imagine there is a large river that needs to flow smoothly to nurture the land around it. The river represents capital, money that needs to flow towards projects that benefit the society and the environment. But without clear pathways, the capital can easily get lost in wrong projects, those that harm more than help. Now, think about taxonomy as the map that shows exactly where the river should flow, defining what is truly green, what is sustainable. It helps us navigate and ensure the money is going where it matters the most, which is to the projects that creates a positive impact to the people and the planet. This is where green taxonomy comes in, offering clear and consistent criteria to guide investment in a sustainable direction. And good thing we have Mr. Johnson later from ICSC to discuss the impact and role of green taxonomy in our energy transition, providing us clearer and deeper insights into this concept. Now, based on the poll results that I'm seeing so far, everyone here might not be that familiar with green taxonomy. So, why not catch you up first with the key developments of green taxonomy in EU and ASEAN and in the Philippines over the recent years with this slide? So, the global green taxonomy journey actually began in 2018 when EU published its action plan on financing sustainable growth. This plan set the stage for how to approach sustainable finance, driven by the need to fight climate change and support eco friendly business practices. The EU created green taxonomy as a main tool for the larger sustainable finance framework. And that framework not only includes taxonomy, but also guidelines for green bonds and financial reporting. In 2020, the EU formally adopted the EU taxonomy regulation, followed by the release of the first batch of the technical screening criteria in 2021. Over the years, the taxonomy has been evolving with its third version published this year. And we're also fortunate to have Mr. Giando from Eurochamp Vietnam to delve into the intricacies of EU taxonomy and its applicability. Now, the European Union's success in implementing a green taxonomy has actually shown how clear criteria for sustainable investment can mobilize substantial financial resources towards climate action. This has inspired ASEAN to work into its own version of sustainable finance taxonomy, starting with the ASEAN Sustainable Finance Roadmap in 2019. In 2021, the ASEAN Taxonomy Board was established and the first version of the ASEAN Taxonomy was released. Since then, it has also been evolving with its third version being published this year. And now we are down to the Philippines. So in alignment with global sustainability standards and target, the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas has also issued a circular introducing sustainable finance framework in our country. In collaboration with Sustainable Finance Interagency Committee, BSP launched the Philippine Taxonomy for Sustainable Finance in 2023. This initiative marks a significant step in guiding investment and financing to support the country's climate goals. And it is a great privilege to have Ms. Rodora from BSP with us today, who will further elaborate on the country's green finance taxonomy. BSP has been at the forefront of driving the development and adoption of green taxonomy in the Philippines. Next slide, please. So this is just to give a quick snapshot of EU taxonomy. So as I mentioned, the main goal of the European Union has been to drive investment into climate-friendly projects, all of which aims to reach the net zero emissions by 2050. It articulates sustainable finance activities that contributes to the overall climate goals. And for financial stakeholder, next slide please. The EU taxonomy has been a game changer. It promotes transparency, helps streamline the market, and reduce both reputational and environmental risk. This benefit has really helped speed up sustainable finance and made investment even more attractive across EU region. Shifting our focus to the Philippines, yes. The Philippine taxonomy for sustainable finance offers a local framework to assess the environmental sustainability of economic activities. It follows the basic tenets of alignment, assessment, and criteria. Wow, that's quite a lot to unpack this morning, so I won't keep you any longer. And I'm sure the discussion will help deepen our understanding with green financial taxonomy. So let's dive right in. Back to you, Ivan.
Thank you. Sorry. Thank you so much, Alni, and for that very informative context setting. So before we proceed to our first resource speaker, we have another poll question for you. So let's pull up the second question, please, Alni. So poll number two, how often has the concept of green financial taxonomy been discussed or explored in your organization? So please choose one that best describes your answer. Just a super quick question, everyone. Just kindly answer. Choose the best one that describes it. All right. So while you're answering that, we can move on to the next speaker. But before we do that, we would like to inform everyone that the question and answer or the Q&A box at the bottom of your screens is open throughout the session. So please feel free to type in your questions anytime, even during when our speakers are discussing their presentation, so that our speakers can also answer them when they can. All right? So our first speaker is currently the Climate Policy Manager of the Institute for Climate and Sustainable Cities, or ICSC, where he oversees key areas including enhanced direct access to climate finance, and then he also leads the Climate Finance Accountability Initiative and also serves as the focal point for the Philippines' implementation of the multi-actor partnership on climate and disaster risk finance and insurance. He holds a master's degree in development management from the Asian Institute of Management, where he was a 2023 awardee of the Asian Development Bank Japan Scholarship Program. Here to speak on the impact and role of green financial taxonomy in the clean energy transition, please welcome Mr. Jansen Martinez. Over to you, Jansen.
Thank you, Ivan. Let me share my screen first. Everyone, see my screen? Okay, so good morning, everyone. Thank you for the introduction, Ivan. Again, I am Jansen Martinez, a member of ICSC's climate policy team, and it's a pleasure for me to be here as we gather to discuss the crucial role of green financial taxonomies, as earlier presented, in supporting sustainable finance frameworks, especially in the context of the Philippines and in the larger ASEAN context. In line with this, allow me to present the impact and the role of green financial taxonomy in the clean energy transition, emphasizing how these frameworks can accelerate sustainable investments and support the transition to clean energy. Before going into my presentation, allow me to introduce my organization, ICSC. We are a Philippine-based NGO promoting climate, energy, and low-carbon solutions for a fair, climate-resilient development nationally and internationally. Our portfolio has expanded greatly since 2005, collaborating with political partners and NGOs, leading regional platforms, and engaging in global climate and sustainability discussions. We also take pride in our national and local work, partnering with government agencies to advance campaigns and strengthen capacities in climate finance, governance, energy, and urban development. Now, let's start by defining what a green financial taxonomy is. According to this UNSCAP document, a green financial taxonomy is a classification system that identifies and categorizes activities and investments as green based on their alignment with specific environmental objectives. Its primary goal is to ensure that financial resources are directed toward environmentally sustainable activities in line with broader environmental and sustainability goals such as the SDGs. Green taxonomies play a crucial role in sustainable finance by helping to direct capital towards sustainability, where they ensure that financial resources are allocated to projects and activities aligned with environmental goals such as climate change mitigation and biodiversity conservation. Additionally, these green taxonomies prevent greenwashing by providing clear definitions and criteria, ensuring that only genuinely sustainable projects receive funding. This also enhances market trust and credibility. Another important function of the green taxonomy is to increase transparency. These taxonomies create a common framework that makes it easier for stakeholders to understand, regulate, and finance green activities, fostering confidence among investors and the private sector. Lastly, they improve market efficiency by standardizing how sustainability is defined and measured, reducing transaction costs and ensuring the investments are efficiently channeled toward sustainable outcomes. A well-designed green financial taxonomy is built on several critical features as presented in the screen. First, it needs to provide clarity by offering clear definitions of green activities, which helps reduce information gaps. And it also ensures public accessibility, making it available to everyone for transparency and wide adoption. The taxonomy needs to be science-based, grounded in climate science to ensure alignment with environmental goals, and its credibility is maintained through independent reviews and guarantee compliance and reliability. It also promotes consistency, aligning with both national and international best practices. And lastly, a good taxonomy is adaptable, evolving as market conditions and scientific knowledge advance. When designing a green financial taxonomy, several key considerations are essential. First, it must have clear objectives that align with national and sustainability strategies, such as climate change mitigation and adaptation. And this taxonomy should be tailored to its users, including regulators, financial institutions, and also to investors. And the scope of this taxonomy must define the activities and sectors it covers, often using international classification systems. And finally, interoperability is crucial, ensuring alignment with other taxonomies existing and under development, and to facilitate cross-border investments and reduce compliance costs for stakeholders. For the purposes of the context of the Greening the Banks initiative of Allotrope Partners, I will focus on the ASEAN Taxonomy for Sustainable Finance as an example. So this document, as you see in your screen, is a strategic framework developed to guide ASEAN member states in adopting sustainable finance. It provides a science-based, inclusive approach to classify economic activities based on their environmental contributions and their alignment with SDGs and the Paris Agreement. This version builds on previous versions by incorporating feedback from stakeholders and aligning with national taxonomies existing and under development in the region. The ASEAN taxonomy is built around key components that work together to guide sustainable finance in the region. At the core are the environmental objectives, as you see on the upper left in the screen, which includes climate change mitigation and adaptation, protection of healthy ecosystems and biodiversity, and the promoting of resource resilience and circular economy. Any activity must contribute to at least one of these objectives to be classified as sustainable or have the green category. Supporting these objectives are the essential criteria, which ensure that activities do no significant harm, include remedial measures for transition, and address social aspects like human rights, including children's rights, and also labor rights. These activities, the taxonomy provides two assessment frameworks. First is the foundation framework, which offers a principles-based flexible approach for ASEAN member states to look into, and also the plus standard, which uses more advanced and technical screening criteria for specific sectors. Together, all of these components, as you see in your screen, ensure that sustainability is promoted across diverse economies and sectors throughout the ASEAN region. The ASEAN taxonomy highlights two key categories to drive sustainable finance, namely focus sectors and enabling sectors. The focus sectors are the critical industries that have the highest environmental and economic impact in the ASEAN region, as shown on the screen. And each of these sectors play a major role in achieving the region's environmental objectives, especially in reducing emissions and promoting sustainability. Also, in addition to these focus sectors, there are enabling sectors, which include what you can see on the lower right of the screen. And these sectors help provide the adoption of sustainable practices across the focus sectors by providing the tools, the technologies, and the infrastructure needed for clean energy transition. One of the key features of the ASEAN taxonomy is its interoperability with both national and international taxonomies. Yet the ASEAN taxonomy is designed to be flexible, allowing it to align with the unique sustainability frameworks of individual ASEAN member states, including the Philippines, while ensuring consistency across the region. On the international front, the ASEAN taxonomy is aligned with global frameworks such as the EU taxonomy, which will be discussed later. and the Paris Agreement's 1.5-degree target, ensuring the region's sustainable finance efforts meet the global standards. Another key feature of the ASEAN taxonomy is the coal phase out for this version, representing the region's commitment to reducing reliance on coal as part of its broader sustainability goals. The ASEAN taxonomy is the first regional taxonomy to include coal phase out, marking a significant step towards the region's decarbonization. Coal phase out in this document is classified as a transitional activity, meaning it supports the gradual retirement of coal-fired power plants, like encouraging the shift to cleaner energy sources like renewables. To accelerate this transition, the taxonomy provides incentives for early action, encouraging financial support for projects that expedite the closure of coal plants. In driving the ASEAN region, the green taxonomy is a key instrument in driving the clean energy transition. It provides clear definitions for sustainable activities and helps channel investments into projects that support environmental goals, such as reducing greenhouse gas emissions and shifting to RE. Through this, the taxonomy not only supports the region's sustainability agenda, but also promotes economic development that aligns with global climate objectives. The ASEAN Green Taxonomy sets clear guidelines for the energy sector, offering criteria to classify activities like RE generation and energy efficient technologies. And this ensures that financial investments are directed toward activities that contribute to decarbonization and align with the goal of climate change mitigation, helping countries meet their national and regional sustainability targets. A key element of the taxonomy is its role in promoting the transition away from fossil fuels. The inclusion of coal phase out is a classifiable activity that allows the region to prioritize and finance the early retirement of coal-fired power plants. And this mobilizes capital toward cleaner energy sources like solar and wind, accelerating the region's shift away from coal dependency and reducing greenhouse gas emissions. The taxonomy also aligns with international standards such as the EU taxonomy and the Paris Agreement targets. By harmonizing its framework with global benchmarks, ASEAN can attract international investment into its clean energy projects. This alignment also ensures that the ASEAN sustainability efforts are recognized and supported by global capital markets, enhancing the region's ability to finance its clean energy transition. Also, the clean energy transition must be socially just, and the green taxonomy addresses this by focusing on the impacts on communities and workers. The taxonomy ensures that the shift to clean energy is done in an inclusive and equitable manner with considerations for job creation, labor and children's rights, as well as the well-being of communities affected by the transition away from fossil fuels. This approach supports a just energy transition that leaves no one behind. Today, we will look into the 5 key challenges associated with the implementation of green taxonomies, particularly in the context of ASEAN's clean energy transition. While green taxonomies are essential for aligning investments with sustainability, there are areas where we can improve. These challenges will help us understand what's needed to ensure a more inclusive, effective, and impactful transition toward a sustainable economy. The first challenge is the need for a more localized tracking system. The ASEAN taxonomy, as the example, provides a high-level regional alignment, but without detailed tracking mechanisms at the local or at the national level. It's hard to assess whether sustainability goals are being achieved in real terms, and each country in the ASEAN has its own environmental context and socioeconomic structure, so a one-size-fits-all might not work. Enhanced local tracking would allow us to measure progress where it matters most, which is on the ground within communities and across diverse local industries affected by the transition. The second challenge involves smaller players like MSMEs and electric cooperatives, which often face significant resource constraints. These businesses make up a large portion of ASEAN's economy, but might lack the financial and technical resources to comply with the sustainability guidelines. While the taxonomy focuses on large sectors like energy and manufacturing, MSMEs and electric cooperatives need specific support mechanisms, for example, tailored green financing, capacity building, and technical assistance in order to help them become active participants in the clean energy transition. The third challenge is strengthening social safeguards. While the ASEAN taxonomy does address social aspects such as labor rights and community impacts, there's room for improvement in how these safeguards are implemented and enforced. Because as we transition to cleaner energy, it's critical that we don't leave communities behind, particularly those dependent on fossil fuel industries. We need clear guidelines on ensuring the sustainable projects contribute positively to social outcomes, coming from job creation to the protecting the rights of vulnerable groups affected. Next is the gap in monitoring, reporting, and verification, or more known as the MRV. The taxonomy, as an example, emphasizes continuous review and stakeholder input, but doesn't provide clear, structured MRV guidelines. Without robust MRV processes, it's hard to know whether activities labeled as sustainable are truly delivering their promised environmental benefits. Establishing clear MRV protocols, which is defining key performance indicators and reporting schedules, will ensure greater transparency and accountability in sustainable investments. Finally, the fifth challenge identified in this example is balancing classification with impact measurements. The ASEAN taxonomy is effective at classifying activities into categories like green or amber, but we also need to focus on the long-term impact of these activities. It is not enough to just label an activity as sustainable. We need to measure whether it's making a real difference in reducing emissions, protecting ecosystem, or supporting a circular economy. By tracking the actual outcomes, we can ensure that the green taxonomy isn't just a tool for classification, but a tool for driving real-world impact. As I approach the end of my presentation, here are some takeaways. So the green financial taxonomies play a vital role in guiding investments toward sustainable projects, particularly in clean energy. They provide clarity and consistency, helping align financial flows with global climate goals and making them a key tool for accelerating the transition to renewable energy. However, challenges remain. We need better systems to monitor the real impact of these investments, ensure accessibility for smaller businesses, and strengthen social safeguards to support a just transition, especially communities dependent on fossil fuels. Green taxonomies are a critical step forward, but continued improvements are necessary to maximize their impact on both the environment and society. And here I end my presentation. Thank you very much for listening.
All right. Thank you so much, Jansen, for that informative presentation. We look forward to hearing more from you during the Q&A and panel discussion. So please sit tight. Thank you so much. All right. So before we proceed to our next speaker, let us have our final poll question for this morning. Let's flash it, Alni, please. Okay. We're still looking for it. All right. So for the third and final one, so between 1 to 5, 5 being the highest, what level of awareness do you have about the impacts of the green financial taxonomy on your business or industry? So again, please choose among the numbers from 1 to 5 that best describes your answer. All right. Okay. So moving on to our next presentation. So our next speaker has a diverse background in renewable energy investment, financial technology, and sustainable finance policy. He initiated Enel's operations in Indonesia and Vietnam in 2015, and in 2021, he founded Aquila.is. Currently, he is the chairman of the Eurocham Vietnam's Sustainable Finance Sector Committee. Here to discuss the EU Green Financial Taxonomy Framework, everyone please welcome Mr. Giando Zapia. Jando, the virtual floor is yours. Sorry, Jando, I think you're muted. Uh, we still can't hear you. Sorry. Which, wait a minute. Maybe your other device is muted, Jando. Mm, There you go.
Is
I
it
think
better
we have you
now?
now.
Yes?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you for your patience. Good morning, everyone. My name is Jando Zappia, and I am glad to be here today. Thank you for the invite. Can you see my screen? I hope it is a yes.
It's a yes. Yeah.
I have the pleasure today to speak about the impact of the EU taxonomy on banks' operations. And first, a brief introduction about the sector committee that I represent. This is a very young organization inside Eurocham Vietnam, which is the largest chamber of commerce in Vietnam, appointed by the government to represent the interests of FDIs towards various ministries. And the work that we have done this year has been primarily focused on sustainable trade finance, ESG disclosures and taxonomy, and adaptation finance. Aquila, my company, is a monitoring, reporting, and verification platform for sustainable finance, leveraging Internet of Things technology to allow the provision of data for the issuance of sustainable finance. A brief introduction first about sustainable finance numbers and taxonomies around the world. This year, we had a relatively lower volume of deals being tracked in sustainable finance worldwide, driven primarily by macroeconomic conditions and interest rates, which are coming to a lower rate only in this last quarter of the year. Nevertheless, the industry is healthy and growing, discounting a little bit the operational costs and compliance burden that the new regulations are imposing on us all. In terms of taxonomies, we registered more than 47 sustainable finance taxonomies currently executive around the world, 31 of which are national taxonomies, and 13 part of the Sustainable Banking and Finance Network, which has issued a very good toolkit for assessment of taxonomies, which I will be showing you at the end of the presentation. I will start with a view of the impact of the EU taxonomy on banks, with a commentary provided by ING Bank, and I will follow with a view of the SBFN toolkit. This is a view of all the taxonomies around the world. You can see there are some international ones, some that has interoperable criteria, such as the EU-China one, and all the national that are being developed. A brief history about the EU taxonomy. As already mentioned, this was issued in 2020, and in 2022, financial and non-financial entities had to report on the EU taxonomy eligibility. 2023 required non-financial entities to report on eligibility and alignment, and for financial entities, still eligibility. This year is important because for the first time, banks had to report both on eligibility and alignment, and this is going to be the focus of my presentation. In 2025 and onwards, we see additional reporting obligations because the financial entities will need to include third-party country disclosure, and there will be the executive CSRD disclosure obligations. Furthermore, in 2026 and 2027, the cluster of companies that will be required to disclose under EU taxonomy will increase. Going back to the banks, this year banks had to disclose what is the green asset ratio and provide a snapshot of what is their environmental sustainability. While some expected the green asset ratio for European banks to be lower than 10%, in the sample analyzed of 31 banks across EU, the average was only 3%. In terms of eligibility, there is an improvement of 5% from when the eligibility disclosure started in 2022 to today in 2024, where there is a 35% eligibility of EU banks alignment eligibility to EU taxonomy. Sorry. What is inside the EU taxonomy? Primarily 6 environmental objectives that you can read here: climate change mitigation, adaptation, use of water and marine resources, transition to a circular economy, pollution prevention and control, and protection and restoration of biodiversity. In order to screen for eligibility, it's relevant to align to delegated acts of the Union and screen the business activity with these 6 criteria. For the alignment, the eligible activities then would be fully compliant only if they have proof of substantial contribution, do not significant harm, or have minimum safeguards with these 6 objectives. How to calculate then the green asset ratio for banks? And this is not a straightforward methodology. First of all, banks need to, or financial institutions in general, have to lay down the understanding of what total assets and cover assets are. And after 2 layers of exclusion, can be doing the alignment work. Once the aligned assets are identified, then a ratio over the covered assets will provide the green asset ratio of the bank. I know that this seems to be confusing, and I confirm that this is confusing, and we are still in an adjustment phase, as we will see later on. The discrepancies of this methodology are due to the calculations that the corporates in the loan book of banks rely upon. In fact, they can calculate the sustainability ratio over turnover, CapEx, or OpEx. We can see that the majority of the banks in our sample are disclosing over turnover and CapEx KPIs. Only 3% disclosed over turnover and 23% over turnover and CapEx and OpEx, with total assets being involved in this case. This is to say that banks are, for the first time this year, disclosing this information, and there is a big variance of the disclosures, which I will provide an example in the next slides. Only a few banks have provided the GAR for their investment flow, with the majority providing the green asset ratio calculation only for their asset stock. Here a comparison of banks across countries where you see that there is eligibility alignment primarily on Northern European countries and a lower alignment for Southern and Eastern European countries. Also, the variation is higher for companies, banks, especially in the Netherlands, who have built one of the most solid sustainable finance regulatory frameworks. This is to say that although the system is imperfect, there is a view that the GAR will become more and more the right metric to provide a view on the assets that can be improved from being eligible to be aligned to EU taxonomy. Finally, the scope of the EU taxonomy will increase, as we have seen in the timeline with the history of the EU plan. And here we can see that the scope will increase once the CSRD will be implemented and companies, small, medium enterprises, and active in third countries will be included in the eligibility application. Finally, a view on the results from the industry and request for caution. First of all, there are large data gaps on the data collection, both for the banks and the corporates in the loan book of banks. There is a large application uncertainty that especially the European Banking Federation has manifested towards EU authorities. Nevertheless, the imperfect methodology is considered needed in order to achieve sustainability goals. The most important things to be cautioned about are the scope of the taxonomy. In fact, it includes only large corporates for now. The fact that today the ratio provides still asymmetric results. And finally, that for project finance, which is how large energy projects are financed, especially in the renewable energy space, this would not be captured by the taxonomy or the green asset ratio because they are not under the balance sheet of banks. I will now show briefly, I don't know if you have the view of my entire screen. Here are the first products of BNP Paribas disclosures for wealth management this year, aligned with SFDR. And this is the BNP Paribas Green Asset Ratio disclosure that you can find online at the link that I have pasted here below. And naturally, these slides can be circulated to all participants. The second section of my presentation, and I will be very quick here, is to give a view of the comparison between sustainable finance taxonomies as a summary of the most important criteria to be remembered when developing and applying a taxonomy, and how different countries view sustainable finance taxonomies. First, we start with the overarching goals and alignments. I will not go into the details of this, but it's a very interesting view of how different taxonomies set goals and alignment. Moving on to the alignment activity, which is different in ASEAN compared to the EU. Scope and sustainability topics, which also differ across jurisdictions. Implementation, which widely differs across jurisdictions. And I'm sure that you are starting to get where am I going with this. Also, the process for creation and revision is different and creates difficult challenges for authorities, especially due to the political cycle. As you know, this year the EU had new parliamentary elections, and the EU Commission has been sworn in just yesterday, and this delays the application process and execution. Finally, it's very different also how authorities deploy the mechanism to manage negative outcomes or harm, and governance, for which the EU taxonomy, which comes as one of the first in the world for a union of 27 states, has a very complex governance structure, and by many international observers should be improved. So not necessarily the best to look at as a model, but complex due to the number of states and political wills that have been synthesized in building the taxonomy. Environmental and social safeguards, which we spoke about briefly, and a comparison with ASEAN taxonomy. How to align with do not do significant harm. And finally, the interoperability of taxonomies between countries. And as we can imagine, and I hope the Q&A could touch upon it, the alignment between national taxonomies with regional and international ones, given the nature of our global business community. In fact, EU-China had to develop an alignment framework, and probably similar work is already ongoing between the ASEAN and the ASEAN countries, interoperable frameworks. Thank you for listening, and I'm happy to join the Q&A later.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jando. Yeah, and I think our audience are thrilled when you mentioned that you can share your slides with them. So we will definitely do that post event. So yeah, and thank you as well you to in making time for the panel discussion later. So we look forward to that as well, hearing more from you. All right, so we can move on to our last, but definitely not least, our final speaker heads the ESG Supervision and Surveillance Group under the Office of the Assistant Governor, Policy and Specialized Supervision Subsector. The group leads the research and development of enabling policies and regulations on sustainable finance for BSP supervised financial institutions. These included the Sustainable Finance Framework, regulatory incentives, the taxonomy guidelines, among others. She currently is the Deputy Director for the Financial Supervision Sector of the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas, or BSP. Here to present the Philippine Sustainable Finance Taxonomy Guidelines, please welcome Ms. Rodora Brazil de Vera. Over to you, Ms. Beng.
Okay, thank you, Ivan. I hope you can hear me clearly. Sorry for my husky voice. Okay,
Yes po, super clear, ma'am.
okay. So again, good morning, everyone, and thank you, Allotrope, for the opportunity to be part of this webinar. So I'll be discussing the Sustainable Finance Taxonomy Guidelines, how it fits into the regulatory framework of the BSP on sustainable finance. Is it consistent with the country's climate commitments? Is it interoperable with ASEAN taxonomy or other taxonomies in the region? So these are just some of the questions I will try to discuss as I go along with my presentation. Next slide, please. So how do we means perhaps I'll start first with discussing how do we mainstream the sustainability in the financial sector. So this is still in line with our financial stability mandate. So we issued the sustainability related regulations in phases. And first, it is important for banks to understand the climate and environmental risks, and so they can manage this effectively. So we have issued the Sustainable Finance Framework in 2020. This is followed by other supplementary circulars requiring the incorporating environmental and social risk factors in the lending activities, investing activities, and also in the operational risk management framework of banks. But we understand that there are already banks who are advanced, even the small banks. There are also some that are already into lending, into, for instance, into renewable energy. So to scale sustainable finance, the BSP is also providing regulatory incentives for supervised institutions that are within our monetary and prudential tools. So this is to incentivize them to continue to lend and finance green or sustainable projects, including transition activities. So the slide shows you some of the regulatory incentives that we have so far. And then lastly, to further attract financing, of course, financing should not only come from the banking system, but also from the capital markets, or if we can mobilize not only domestic funds, but also attract foreign fundings, then we promote transparency and disclosures to empower the investors. So we have here the taxonomy, and after um, along with the taxonomy, we will also enhance the sustainability disclosures under under the sustainable finance framework of the BSP. So, of course, following the jurisdictional roadmap being developed by the Philippine Sustainability Reporting Committee. But next slide, please. So, in all this mainstreaming, we are just like to highlight in this slide that we are mindful of these factors, of course, the government policies and strategies, particularly of the economic growth targets of the country, because that is what we are eyeing for. And then the dual role of the banks, the risk management side, and also the the other side, which is to provide um, complementary financing to the public funds. And lastly is on unintended consequences. Of course, we do not want to further that while we push for sustainability, we further exclude those vulnerable sector, or terminate financing relationship, which might affect the flow of supply chain. So we do not want to disrupt those relationships. Next slide, please. So thank you to Jansen for discussing the ASEAN taxonomy for sustainable finance. So this slide just shows the jurisdictions that have already issued their respective taxonomies and have actually aligned those taxonomies with the ASEAN taxonomy. So we already have Indonesia, Malaysia, but for Malaysia, there are two taxonomies, the one issued by the central bank and also the Securities Commission, and then the Singapore, Thailand. For Thailand, it's only focused on two sectors, and then the Philippines, the Sustainable Finance Taxonomy Guidelines. In various presentations by the Sustainable Finance Institute Asia, which is the host of the ASEAN Taxonomy Board, they have actually mapped all these taxonomies, and they have indicated that these taxonomies are aligned with the design elements of the ASEAN taxonomy for sustainable finance. Next slide, please. So I'll just walk you through to the timelines when we developed the sustainable finance taxonomy guidelines. So the development of the taxonomy um, is one of the recommendations identified under the Sustainable Finance Roadmap and Guiding Principles, which were released by the Interagency Technical Working Group on Sustainable Finance, or what we call the Green Force. So this is led by the Department of Finance and the Climate Change Commission. And just to also highlight in this slide, the BSP, sorry, the development of the taxonomy um, is assigned to the Financial Sector Forum member agencies, the BSP, the SEC, and the Insurance Commission. So we leverage on existing governance structures in the development of this taxonomy. And also, we also leverage in existing arrangements with counterpart foreign regulators in terms of capacitating also ourselves and in discussing some challenges faced by other regulators. So we could also consider that in our as we implement this taxonomy. And so it was in February 2024 when um the it was in January 2024 when the FSF approved the taxonomy, and then the BSP and the Securities and Exchange Commission issued the respective regulations in February 2024. Next slide, please. Okay, so okay, so the taxonomy, as I mentioned, as mentioned earlier by Jansen, there are some critical features. So I'd say that the taxonomy that we have developed is also adopts some of those features, particularly being consistent with the national strategies, policies, and commitments of the government. We have it is also, well, of course, it's largely drawn from the ASEAN taxonomy, particularly the foundation framework. And then this taxonomy is only the first version. So we would expect further iteration to this taxonomy. So this current version is principles based, and it's accompanied by guiding questions. If if uh, if you have already seen the taxonomy document, there are guiding questions there for in assessing the environmental objective or the other essential criteria. So and then on the next slide, these are just some of the highlights as mentioned under circular number 1187. So as also mentioned earlier, this is a tool which we can use to classify if the activity is environmentally and socially sustainable, and it can further guide us on also in designing, for instance, a bank is can design its sustainable finance instrument. It the bank can also consider or adopt the taxonomy in designing such financial product. And of course, the main purpose of the taxonomy is to increase or attract more capital inflows to these activities to further our sustainability objectives, including our climate resilience building and just transition. So next slide. So this slide, the circular the circular number 1187 is the one that adopts the sustainable finance taxonomy guidelines. So the taxonomy currently covers only two environmental objectives, which is the climate change mitigation and climate change adaptation. That is for this current version. As I mentioned earlier, the taxonomy is follows an iterative development process. So the future iterations may include biodiversity or circular economy. And then for the priority sectors or the focus sectors, we are adopting those sectors that are reflected in the country's nationally determined contribution, and also those that are enumerated in the national adaptation plan. If you have already seen that document, I think it's already posted on the website of the Climate Change Commission. So those are the focus sectors that we have adopted under the SFTG, and also the SFTG also recognizes the enabling sector similar to the ASEAN taxonomy. And then on the next slide, so these are the steps that we these are some of the sorry these are the assessment procedures in under the SFTG. So I won't be discussing them in detail, but it before we assess whether which environmental objective is being contributed to, it is important that um, the economic activity to be financed should not be in the list of excluded activities, and also it's compliant with Philippine laws. However, the SFTG, while there are some activities that are included in the exclusion list, but are considered as enablers of climate change mitigation or adaptation, then that activity can still be financed or can be assessed under the taxonomy. And then after that, after steps 1 and 2, we now determine which environmental objective is more relevant to the activity, and then we check it if it has no significant harm to the other um, environmental objective. For instance, the activity being assessed is contributes more to climate change mitigation, and then when we assess the do no significant harm, have it should not be harmful to the climate change adaptation objective. But if there is harm, the taxonomy provides a RMT period of 5 years, that is without verification, mandatory verification. But if the company deems that the RMT period is more than 5 years, then the taxonomy allows up to 10 years RMT period, but there should be an independent verification to lend credibility to the longer remediation period. And lastly, if you will note, in in steps 1 to 5, we are assessing the activity, but in step 6, we are assessing now the company. So the company um, should not should be compliant with the minimum social safeguard. And if it's a yes, then we now proceed to the classification of the activity um, as green or amber or red. So on the next slide, okay, so that's a traffic light system. So meaning green, it meets all the essential criteria of the NSH and MSS, and then the amber, this is more on the transition side, and then the red, if the significant harm, there's no remedial measures adopted by the company, or the company does not comply with the minimum social safeguard, then the classification of the activity could be red. Okay, and moving towards the next, to my last slide. So this is just the next steps. So when we rolled out the taxonomy last, sorry, when we issued the taxonomy last February, we are actually running workshops and briefings, not only for banks, but also internally for our supervisors, and also in coordination with the Securities and Exchange Commission. So that will continue, since there are a lot of banks in the Philippines. So we have to increase our the frequency of our capacity building, or conduct of briefings for the taxonomy. And then um the BSP actually collaborates with the Bankers Association of the Philippines in conducting some of the support activities of the to for the effective implementation of the taxonomy. So we are working with the BAP, particularly in how we integrate the SFTG in the credit risk framework. So this is part of our work that will be discussed, and hopefully um, we could develop a guidance document out of this exercise. And then another leg of that work is the design of the related prudential reporting template. So these are two parallel activities. And then the SFTG updating. So this will be done by under the, as I mentioned earlier, the governance structures of the Green Force and the Financial Sector Forum. So this will be under their umbrella. So there are actually, I'm not sure if um well, as I mentioned earlier, future iterations will cover the circular economy, taxonomy, the biodiversity, and we can also explore um, adoption of activity-based approach if there are already um, technical thresholds available with other government agencies. So that's it from my end, and I hope oh, sorry. Before I end, I saw a question earlier, related to s- where's the question? Here. Sorry, I'll answer na rin the question if before I end. Is the agriculture, fisheries, and rural development financing activities of the bank pursuant to RA 11901 and BSP Circular 1159 compliant with the ASEAN taxonomy framework? Um, This one is not directly related, but i- the the taxonomy is can be as a tool. It can be used to assess if it's the activity is sustainable. S- So if it's sustainable, since sustainable finance is one of the eligible mode of compliance, then that can be used with the AFRD. But actually, we will be releasing a series of frequently asked questions on the taxonomy, and this is one of the items that is included in that FAQ. Thank you. I'll end here. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Beng, for that wonderful presentation. So please request to Keep your camera open as we also request and call again Mr. Jansen and Mr. Giando to also turn on their cameras as we will now proceed with the question and answer and panel discussion. And here to moderate the panel discussion is my colleague, Altrope Partners Philippines Assistant Manager, Joshua Soroni. Josh, over to you.
Thank you, Ivan. First of all, thank you to all our panelists and speakers for attending this event and sharing your knowledge. I do want to preempt with everyone that Giando won't be with us for the whole panel discussion, so we will front load this discussion with questions to Giando and about the EU taxonomy. Um, so if you have any questions, please put it in the Q&A right now. I don't see any specific questions for Giando, so we'll start on our end with some questions we had. And obviously, Jando's presentation had a lot of content, and there was a lot of interesting topics we wanted to explore. Specifically, if you mentioned how banks are aligning with the taxonomy and how they are reporting their portfolios and alignment. Um, do you think there are other stakeholders that should be part of these discussions around financial taxonomies or other stakeholders who are affected other than banks?
Thank you, Josh. Yes, there is a wide number of stakeholders involved, starting from the government, which can provide different type of supports, and naturally the level of complexity varies country to country, and we can see that with the outcomes of the survey, where the Netherlands have the best results in terms of eligibility and alignment, and eastern countries and southern countries in Europe are performing with lower amounts of alignment of the banks. Um, Following, it's the new capacity in the market coming from consultants and coming from technology companies that can support the work of the banks. The banks are faced with a paramount challenge, starting from the reorganization of the data governance inside the bank, reorganizing the information systems, which Jansen has referred to in his presentation, in order to process the data. And we have witnessed that banks themselves have, in most cases, various data silos that don't talk to each other in different departments. So how is it possible to have an integrated approach and a risk evaluation framework that covers the entirety of the operation of the bank? So data governance and technology will require and are requiring additional costs to the banks, with not enough incentives for the banks to do so, considering that there is not a clear penalty system for them not to align, besides the reputational damage. For those who don't believe in transition risk at the core of the risk management practice. So a number of stakeholders involved, but also a very important challenge for all the stakeholders. So coordination and cooperation are, in my opinion, the best ways to move forward.
Thank you, Jando. And actually, I believe you already touched on this, on what the financial taxonomy is achieving and not achieving. So this question is really more to seek your insights on whether you think the EU's green financial taxonomy is meeting its goals. If so, which aspects of the taxonomy have been instrumental in this? And if you think it hasn't, what can it do better? I think you've mentioned this already. And what can it do better that emerging taxonomies like the Philippines and those in Asia could learn from?
I would say these are early days to judge, and I don't
Okay.
like to go there, because it's such a big piece of work
Mm-hmm.
where we just need to push in the same direction. But I can say what is working well, and what is being seen in Europe as the next level of achievement, which is declining taxonomies per sectors, and try to define the differences between sectors, because naturally we are fighting against the standardization requirement so that we can benchmark the activities against the objectives. But at the same time, each sector has very specific structures where taxonomies could be applied in different ways. So one thing that the banks, financial institutions in general, are working on are transition plans for specific sectors: energy, real estate, transport and logistics, metals and mining. And in the same direction, regulators are starting to decline the applicability of the alignment and eligibility criteria per sector.
Mhm. Thank you, Jando. Let's see if we have any questions from the Q&A. Maybe one last question for Giando. Okay, I think our audience might not be too familiar with the EU taxonomy. So we have one last question, and I'm pulling this from your presentation, actually, Jando. You mentioned how the GAR is being used for alignment of bank portfolios with the sustainability um, taxonomy, and also how there are toolkits available. Can you speak more on this and emphasize the need for it, and whether you think there are ways to improve monitoring activities aside from the GAR?
So what I can say is that the European Central Bank has done very deep work in assessing climate risk and develop risk scenarios for stress testing. The scientific community does not all agree on the sounding evidence that it brings to banks' ROI in the long term, and so there is a bit of discrepancy on how these risk evaluation models are being used for the argument that the green asset ratio is an indicator for the long term profitability of the bank. And I would be very interested to hear the opinion of Madame De Vera on this. I'm not a specialist in this case, but one thing that I am very interested about is seeing the collaboration between the private sector and the government, and the private sector in particular for pension funds and insurers, which are taking a very long-term view on the economy, where banks are actually more prone to bank on shorter cycles of capital. And so there is a different approach in prudential regulatory from the government on monetary policy, for example, depending on the assets at stake. On this, I would say the GAR is only an element in this mix, but there are different views on its usefulness, even in the banking community in Europe.
Hmm. Ms. Veng, would you like to respond?
Yeah. As to the pension funds, this is actually covered by another regulatory agency. Nonetheless, the Insurance Commission, the SEC and BSP are closely in collaboration through the Financial Sector Forum.
And the Financial Sector Forum is a working group you have, correct?
No, it's actually an institutionalized platform, although it's a
Mhm.
voluntary body that was created in 2004. It's comprised of the four financial sector regulators the three agencies that I mentioned, and also the Philippine Deposit Insurance Commission. It's a platform wherein they discuss common issues across the financial sector. And also to harmonize, also it's also a venue to discuss and harmonize their regulations. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. So we do actually have a few questions from the Q&A directed to EU and maybe interoperability. So I'll read it out. Maybe Jando and other panelists can comment on this. So this attendee is saying, I am part of a foreign bank that has a branch in the Philippines. We already have a sustainable finance framework within the Asia Pacific region implemented by the regional office in Singapore to all APAC branches. In this framework, we're able to identify green and sustainable transactions. As a branch, we have to align with this regional policy. Do we still implement anything locally? So this is a question on the interoperability of different financial taxonomies. Does anyone care to comment on how you view if this is a problem or what would you advise they do in terms of alignment?
Okay, if I may answer first.
Mm-hmm.
Um, well, the taxonomy, as I mentioned earlier, it's still the first version. So if this bank can compare the design elements of their framework with the taxonomy, particularly if moving forward we will already require the reporting to BSP, then I think there's some it's worth also exploring the commonalities of their framework and also of the sustainable finance taxonomy.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Ms. Beng. And then I guess one last question on interoperability as well, maybe in particular to EU companies or EU portfolios. So I understand that this year, 2024, we had disclosures from banks on their GIR, and I believe in 2029 or in the future, we will have disclosures for portfolios that span outside of the EU. Um, are these in alignment with the EU taxonomy only, or do you expect these disclosures to also cover alignment with um, local or other foreign taxonomies? This is a question to Giando.
Sorry, Josh. Yes. As I shared earlier, the activities in third countries, non-EU, will be relevant only in 2026, if I'm not wrong.
Oh,
So
2026. Okay.
yes. So in terms of reporting to the EU, this is not obligatory yet.
Mhm. Okay. I think we'll go to other questions now. Giando, thank you, of course, for attending and answering those questions. Feel free to stay if you still have time, but thank you for attending our session. Um, okay, we'll look at other questions here in the Q&A. For Jansen and the ICSC, how is the Philippines doing in terms of developing an MRB framework for sustainable financing?
Yeah, I think this question could be more answered by our colleague in BSP, because right now, as I understand, the so the green taxonomy of the Philippines is only in its first version, and there are expected developments and positive iterations depending on the consultations with stakeholders. So right now, I haven't really looked into the MRV uh, processes within the Philippine taxonomy. And can I cross into another question, which is
Sure, feel
maybe
free.
relevant to or already related to this question, since there's another question on the ASEAN MRV. Maybe I could share more about that instead of the Philippines, since it asked if does the ASEAN taxonomy framework have industry standards or best practices in the document. So I saw that question and take a took a quick look in the document, and I don't think there are industry standards or best practices already included in the document for the version 3. I think there is only like an overarching uh, uh, statement here that they emphasize the need for continuous review and stakeholder consultation.
Mhm. All right, thank you. Ms. Bank, can you comment on the MRV question? I'll read it out loud again. How is
Um,
the Philippines developing an MRV framework for sustainable financing?
actually, we do not have that MRV framework yet. But and as I mentioned in one of the slides, we're still on the our next step is one of our next step is the development of the prudential template to be submitted by banks. So that will be part of our monitoring as well.
Hmm. And
And the taxonomy is not yet effective as of now. So we're still doing some of the support to the implementation. Thank you.
and can you highlight if um, there are wait, this is a question actually for the ASEAN taxonomy framework. But I guess I'll retool it. For the Philippines, are there industry standards or expectations on monitoring and reporting as well as verification of green finance compliance? Can you highlight what you've included or what you want to include in future iterations? Miss Bang, you're on mute. Can you?
Sorry.
There you go.
As I
Please repeat.
mentioned earlier, the updating of the sustainable finance taxonomy guidelines will be under the Green Force and also the Financial Sector Forum. But some of the areas that may be covered in the future iterations are expanding first the environmental objectives to also cover circular economy and biodiversity, and if we can also look on because we're also in constant communication with the Department of Energy, so we can see the data of the Department of Energy if we can already establish some thresholds for the adoption of the PLASI standard.
Hmm. All right.
So
Thank you
those
very
are
much.
just some of the areas that can be explored, but there are other areas that may be explored depending on the discussions of the government agencies involved.
Can I also chime into the, the
Sure.
answer?
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Please.
Yeah, as mentioned by Ma'am Rodora, MRV isn't existing yet in the Philippine taxonomy guidance, but I think there are already other existing um, MRV mechanisms, or we can we can say that there are tracking mechanisms existing in the government. For example, the Climate Change Commission has been already looking into climate change, climate tag, international finance, development finance, and along with the DOF and also NEDA. NEDA tracks ODA tag, climate development finance going here in the Philippines. It's just a matter of like consolidating these databases, since I think some of these databases are only accessible internally with some of the government agencies. So as ICSC, it's part of our advocacy or part of our work into that we need to promote the transparency of the data regarding financial flows. Yeah, and also to add, there are also national level policies such as the climate change expenditure tagging, but this is not for banks. This is for LGUs provinces that they are required to tag climate related projects, activities or programs that they think are for climate change adaptation or mitigation.
Mhm. All right, thank you for that. Fortunately, we are running a little bit over, so we'll have to end with the questions, but we'll give the panelists just a few seconds to give any final thoughts before we close out. Um, to our attendees, unfortunately, we didn't get to your questions, but hopefully you can work with us so that we can explore this topic further and try to address those questions. So, Ms. Bang and Sir Jansen, please some final remarks or call to action if you want.
Oh, okay. I'll start first. Since there are a lot of questions that may not be answered during this session, um,
Yes.
um, we will again. I'll promote. We will release an FAQ for to serve or to provide further guidance for banks in the implementation of the sustainable finance taxonomy guidelines, and also if you have if banks have questions, they may email that to our group email, sustainablefinance at bsp.gov.ph, and will also reach out to you together with, well, in coordination with the supervising department. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bang. Sir Jansen, any last?
Yeah. I'd like to thank Allotrope Partners for having us, Ma'am Rodora and Jando, to speak here in the event. And also, like I I I just like to share what ICSC thinks of in terms of the the fairly new discussions on green taxonomy. So we think green taxonomies pretty effective, are really effective tools into guiding financial flows into towards sustainability and environmental goals. But we think these international and national policies should be mainstreamed at the local level. I think it's one of the factors that need to be considered by the ASEAN Taxonomy Board and by the BSP, the DOF, and the SEC when doing their next iteration to the green taxonomies. How do we translate this into a policy that can be used not just by the private sector or the banks, but also be used by the cooperatives, by the MSMEs, by the LGUs as well.
All right. Thank you, Jansen. Thank you, everyone, to the panelists for being open to these questions. I'll pass it on to Ivan for some last remarks for our event. Thank you, and please hand it over to Ivan.
Thank you so much, Josh. Again, thank you, Sir Jansen of ICSC and Miss Beng from the BSP and also from Giando earlier. And thank you so much for your time again in allowing us to invite you for to get your thoughts, pick on your brains on this particular topic that is very that is emerging in globally and regionally, but might not be quite familiar yet in the Philippines. So hopefully we are starting to get the ball rolling so that when the time comes that everyone's at least ready or at least somehow informed already about green financial taxonomy, the topic of green financial taxonomy. So thank you so much. All right, before we conclude, please allow me to bring up some few important things first. So again, thank you everyone for being here this morning. We have a huge, a great turnout, a good number in terms of participants. So thank you. We truly appreciate it. If you or your organization decides to continue the conversation on green financial taxonomy and explore ways on how you can contribute in accelerating the country's green finance market transformation, let us bring you along the journey. We're looking for action oriented partners that we can support in advancing their sustainability commitments. So through a light touch, non-binding document such as a letter of intent or LOI, we can explore areas of collaboration that aim to have a meaningful impact to not just your day-to-day business operations, but to the overall sustainable development efforts in the Philippines and the region. We will get in touch, or please get in touch with us if you think that is helpful for your organization as well. We will also be sending everyone here, the participants, a thank you email that will include a link to a post-event survey that we hope that you could fill out diligently via Google Forms. So it's just a super quick survey. So we encourage everyone to fill that out, and then kindly indicate as well. There's a portion there where you can indicate potential areas of collaboration request for Greening the Banks if you want to take this on further for any follow-on actions. Lastly, this capacity building session is just the start of a series of events that we will be conducting um, this year. So we hope you can join us every time. This includes, more virtual capacity building sessions on different topics, such as the battery energy storage system. We will also hold in-person matchmaking events wherein we will be inviting different FIs such as banks, as well as small and medium developers, so that they can have conversations for potential financing opportunities and matchmaking opportunities. So we will keep you posted, and we will update everyone for that portion. So again, for the materials and the recording of the video, we will also be providing it to everyone next week. So we have gotten some approvals from the speakers already that they can share the materials with the participants, as well as we will also be uploading the link to the event recording on our YouTube page. So watch out for that. We will send it through email to all the participants who attended today. All right. So I think that's it. We are just over time by 10 minutes, so I think that's a good sign. But nevertheless, everyone, thank you so much for staying all throughout the event. We truly appreciate your time for being with us this morning, and we hope you have learned a lot from our expert speakers who has been with us also this morning. So again, thank you, everyone. My name is Ivan Limbuco from Greening the Backs. Have a great day and have a great lunch. Thank you, everyone. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.